afternoon light comes through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corner office on the 47th floor of the Madison Tower in streams so bright they make the mahogany desk glow like amber. And Robert Crawford sits behind that desk reviewing quarterly earnings reports, while his executive secretary, Jessica Morgan, stands in the doorway holding a manila folder that seems to weigh more than paper should weigh, seems to carry some gravity beyond its physical substance. She has been standing there for 37 seconds, according to the clock on the wall behind Robert's head. And he has not looked up because he is absorbed in the numbers that tell him his pharmaceutical company, Crawford Industries, has just posted its most profitable quarter in the company's 28-year history. And Jessica shifts her weight from one foot to the other in the way that people do. When they are carrying something they know they should deliver, but are not sure they want to deliver. The folder in her hands is labeled simply Riverside Clinical Trial Final Report in black marker that has bled slightly into the manila surface, and the edges of the folder are worn in a way that suggests it has been handled many times, has been opened and closed and studied and carried from place to place with the kind of nervous attention people give to things they wish did not exist. Robert finally looks up and sees her standing there, and his expression shifts from the focused intensity of someone reading financial data to the slightly annoyed patience of someone whose concentration has been interrupted. And he asks what she needs in a tone that is not unkind, but is efficient in the way that executives learn to be efficient when time is money and interruptions are costly. Jessica takes 3 steps into the office and places the folder on his desk without meeting his eyes. And she says in a voice that is quieter than her normal voice that this is the final report from the Riverside clinical trial for neuroxin, the Alzheimer's drug that Crawford Industries launched 6 months ago, and that has already generated $200 million in revenue and has been prescribed to more than 40,000 patients nationwide. Robert picks up the folder with the casual confidence of someone who expects reports to confirm what he already knows, expects the data to show what the preliminary results showed, which is that neuroxin is safe and effective and represents a genuine breakthrough in treating a disease that destroys minds and devastates families. And he opens the folder expecting validation and finds instead something that makes his hands go cold and his vision narrow to a tunnel. Before we go further, take a breath with him, because what happens in the next 60 seconds will start a chain reaction that destroys lives and ends careers and raises questions about the price of ambition. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because this story will take you places you did not expect to go. Now tell me this. If you discovered something that could save your career but cost lives, would you bury the truth or burn your future? Leave your answer in the comments, because by the end, you will understand why some secrets are too heavy to carry alone. The report that Robert is reading shows data that contradicts everything the preliminary trial suggested. Shows that neuroxin, when used over periods longer than 6 months, begins to cause severe cognitive decline in approximately 18% of patients. Shows that the very drug designed to slow Alzheimer's progression actually accelerates neurological damage in a significant minority of users. And this statistical analysis is clear enough that even someone without a medical degree can understand that this is not a marginal side effect or an acceptable risk, but rather a catastrophic failure that should have stopped the drug before it ever reached the market. Robert reads the executive summary 3 times because his brain is refusing to process what his eyes are seeing, refusing to accept that the drug his company spent $400 million developing and testing and marketing is not just ineffective for some patients, but actively harmful. And he looks up at Jessica, who is still standing in front of his desk with her arms wrapped around herself in a posture that suggests she wishes she could disappear. He asks where this report came from and why. He's only seeing it now when the drug has been on the market for 6 months and 40,000 patients have been taking it. And Jessica tells him in a voice that shakes slightly that this is the complete final report from Dr. William Harrison, who led the Riverside clinical trial, that it was submitted to the company 4 weeks before the scheduled FDA approval hearing last year, and that Jessica received the report through internal mail and was instructed by the previous executive secretary, Margaret Sullivan, to file it without bringing it to Robert's attention because Margaret said Robert had specifically requested that only positive results be brought to his attention during the approval process. Robert has no memory of making any such request and says so with heat in his voice. And Jessica says that Margaret told her this instruction came through the chief medical officer, Dr. Patricia Blackwell, who reportedly received it from Robert during a closed-door meeting 3 days before the final trial results were due. The office feels smaller suddenly, as if the walls are contracting. And Robert asks Jessica why she is bringing this to him now after 6 months of silence. And she tells him that she was cleaning out old filing cabinets last week and found this report misfiled in a drawer labeled Archive Legal, where it would never have been discovered during any normal document review or audit process. She says that she almost refiled it where she found it because she assumed someone with more authority than a secretary had made the decision about where it should go, but that she read the executive summary out of curiosity and realized what it contained and spent 3 sleepless nights deciding whether bringing it forward would help or hurt or simply cost her the job she desperately needs. She tells him that she has a daughter with cerebral palsy who requires expensive therapies that her insurance only partially covers, and that losing this job would mean losing access to the therapies that are giving her daughter a chance at some version of a normal life. And Robert hears the unspoken question in her words, which is whether he is the kind of person who will punish her for telling the truth or reward her for showing courage. Robert tells Jessica that she did the right thing, bringing this to him, and that her job is secure regardless of what happens next. And he asks her to close the door on her way out and to hold all his calls for the next hour because he needs to think without interruption. Jessica nods and leaves and closes the door with a soft click that sounds like a cell door locking, and Robert sits alone with the report spread across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. And he begins to understand that he is looking at the end of everything he has built, unless he can find a way to contain this information or explain it away, or somehow transform a catastrophe into something manageable. He picks up his phone and calls Dr. Patricia Blackwell directly, without going through assistants or receptionists. And when she answers, He can hear the smile in her voice that fades immediately when he tells her he needs to see her in his office immediately, and that she should clear her afternoon, because the conversation they are about to have will take as long as it takes. Patricia Blackwell arrives within 20 minutes, looking composed in the way that doctors learn to look composed even when delivering terrible news. And she sits in the leather chair across from Robert's desk with perfect posture and folded hands, and asks what is so urgent that it could not wait until their regularly scheduled meeting tomorrow morning. Robert slides the manila folder across the desk toward her and watches her face as she opens it and begins reading. Watches the composure crack and then shatter as she realizes what she is looking at and understands the implications. She asks where he got this report in a voice that has lost its professional smoothness, and Robert tells her that his secretary found it misfiled in an archive drawer, and that according to Jessica, the report was filed there on instructions that supposedly came from Patricia through Margaret Sullivan. Patricia's face goes through several expressions in rapid succession, including confusion and recognition and fear. And she tells Robert that she never gave any such instruction and never saw this report. Until this moment, the silence that follows this denial lasts almost a minute and is filled with the sound of traffic far below and the hum of the building's ventilation system. And finally, Patricia tells Robert that she needs to check her records before making any statements because something is clearly wrong with the chain of custody for this document. She pulls out her phone and begins scrolling through emails and calendar entries while Robert watches. And after several minutes, she stops scrolling and her face goes pale in a way that suggests she has found something she was hoping not to find. She tells Robert that there is an email in her sent folder dated 11 months ago that she has no memory of writing. An email to Margaret Sullivan that instructs her to file the Riverside final report in the legal archive without routing it through normal channels because the report contains proprietary information that should be protected under attorney-client privilege pending review by outside counsel. The email is sent from Patricia's work account at 10:37 p.m. on a Tuesday night, and Patricia says that she is certain she was at her daughter's piano recital at that exact time and has the program from the recital to prove it. And she shows Robert a photo on her phone of her sitting in an auditorium at 10:45 p.m. with a timestamp visible. Robert asks if someone else might have access to her email account, and Patricia says that her laptop is sometimes left in her office overnight when she works late, and that anyone with physical access to the building and enough technical knowledge could theoretically have used it to send emails in her name. The implications cascade through Robert's mind like falling dominoes, and he realizes that what he is looking at is not just medical malfeasance or bureaucratic incompetence, but potentially deliberate fraud, potentially a conspiracy to hide evidence that would have prevented FDA approval. He tells Patricia that they need to assemble a crisis team immediately consisting of the chief legal officer, Thomas Riley, and the head of regulatory affairs, Sarah Martinez, and that they need to do this quietly without alerting anyone else in the organization, because whoever hid this report is still working here and will take steps to protect themselves if they realize the report has been discovered. The crisis team assembles in Robert's office 90 minutes later, and Robert walks them through the report page by page, showing them the data that should have stopped neuroxin before approval and the documentation showing that someone deliberately prevented that data from reaching the people who needed to see it. Thomas Riley, who has been the company's chief legal officer for 12 years, sits with his hands pressed against his temples in the posture of someone trying to prevent their head from exploding. And after Robert finishes presenting the evidence, Thomas says, in a voice that sounds like gravel, that this is the worst situation he has encountered in his entire legal career, and that the company's potential liability is essentially unlimited. Sarah Martinez asks whether there is any way to contain this before it becomes public, and the silence that follows her question is answer enough, because everyone in the room knows that once adverse event data of this magnitude exists, it cannot be hidden, that attempting to suppress it would only compound the crime and guarantee prison time for everyone involved. Thomas says that their only option is to immediately report the findings to the FDA and begin the process of voluntary recall, that they need to move faster than the investigation can move so that they can claim cooperation rather than having cooperation forced on them. And Robert knows that Thomas is right, even though voluntary recall means acknowledging to the world that Crawford Industries put a dangerous drug on the market and kept it there for 6 months after receiving evidence of its dangers. Robert overrides Thomas with the authority that comes from owning 62% of the company's stock and tells them that he is giving them 48 hours to conduct a quiet investigation into how the report was hidden and who had the means and motive to hide it, and that after 48 hours, regardless of what they find, the company will begin full disclosure to the FDA and initiate voluntary recall. Thomas argues that 48 hours is too long and that they should notify the FDA immediately. But Robert stands firm because something in his gut is telling him that there is more to this situation than simple bureaucratic failure, that someone made a conscious decision to hide evidence of harm for a reason that goes beyond negligence. The investigation begins that evening, with Thomas Riley working with the head of security, Daniel Wright, to review email logs and building access records and document modification histories, looking for patterns that might reveal who had the opportunity to hide the Riverside report and who might have had motivation to do so. They discover that on the night the forged email was sent from Patricia's account, there were 17 people with building access who entered or exited the facility between 10 p.m. and midnight. And within the first 6 interviews, they encounter a problem, which is that Margaret Sullivan, who allegedly received the instruction to misfile the report, no longer works for Crawford Industries and has not worked there for 5 months. Thomas manages to reach Margaret by phone at her new residence in Phoenix. And when he explains that the company is conducting an internal investigation into potential fraud, she becomes more cooperative. She confirms that she received an email from Dr. Patricia Blackwell instructing her to file the Riverside report in the legal archive without routing it through normal channels, and that she followed those instructions because they came from someone with authority and because the email specifically mentioned attorney-client privilege, which made it seem legitimate. Margaret says that she asked Patricia about the report during a routine meeting 2 weeks later because she wanted to understand its status, and that Patricia looked confused and said she had no idea what report Margaret was referring to, and that this confusion made Margaret suspicious, but not suspicious enough to escalate. Thomas asks Margaret why she resigned 5 months later, and there is a long pause before Margaret says that she received an anonymous email in June, warning her that people who ask too many questions about Neuroxin tend to experience unfortunate career setbacks, and that the email was specific enough about details of her life, including her daughter's school and her home address, that she felt genuinely threatened. This revelation transforms the investigation from a matter of bureaucratic failure into something darker and more deliberate, and Daniel Wright begins working to trace the threatening email and to identify who at Crawford Industries would have known that Margaret was asking questions about the Riverside report. He shifts his focus to identifying financial irregularities among senior executives who would have had both access and motivation, and within 18 hours he finds something that makes the entire situation suddenly make terrible sense. Gregory Marshall, the chief financial officer, took out a personal loan of $750,000 in December of last year from a private lending group, and the loan came due in June, just weeks after Margaret received the threatening email, and Gregory liquidated a significant portion of his Crawford Industries stock options to repay the loan, taking advantage of the stock price surge that followed Neuroxin's successful launch. Daniel digs deeper into Gregory's finances and discovers a pattern of increasingly risky investments and mounting personal debt that suggests someone living well beyond their means. And the timeline aligns perfectly with the period when the Riverside report should have been in final review. Daniel realizes that Gregory had both motive and opportunity to ensure that nothing prevented Neuroxin's approval, because his personal financial survival depended on the stock price increase that a successful drug launch would generate. Daniel presents this evidence to Thomas and Robert late on the second night of the investigation, and they sit in the conference room looking at financial records and email logs and building access data that together paint a picture of a man who chose personal gain over patient safety. Robert says that he wants to talk to Gregory first because he needs to understand how someone he trusted with the company's finances could have done something this unconscionable. And Thomas warns that confronting Gregory before involving authorities gives him time to destroy evidence or flee, but Robert overrides the objection and says that he is going to Gregory's house tonight with Thomas and Daniel as witnesses. They drive to Gregory Marshall's house in the expensive suburb of Riverside Estates at 11 p.m. and find lights on in the study, and Robert walks up to the front door and rings the bell. Gregory answers, looking surprised to see his CEO and general, counsel and head of security on his doorstep at this hour, and Robert asks if they can come inside because they need to discuss something urgent that cannot wait until morning. Robert does not waste time on pleasantries, but instead places a folder on Gregory's desk containing copies of the financial records Daniel uncovered and the building access logs showing Gregory entering the building at 10:15 p.m. on the night the forged email was sent from Patricia's account. He tells Gregory that the company has recovered Dr. Harrison's final report showing severe adverse effects in 18% of trial participants, that they have evidence the report was deliberately hidden, and that the evidence points to Gregory as the person who orchestrated the cover-up. Gregory sits down heavily in his desk chair and stares at the documents for a long time, before looking up at Robert with an expression that combines defiance and resignation. Gregory tells Robert that people who inherited wealth and built companies with family money have no idea what it is like to live one bad quarter away from losing everything, to have creditors calling at all hours threatening to destroy your life unless you find money you do not have. He says that when he saw the Riverside report, he knew it would tank Neuroxin before launch and would cost the company hundreds of millions, and would crater the stock price and destroy the value of his options, which represented his only path out of debt. And so he made a choice that seemed rational at the time, which was to hide one problematic report long enough to get the drug approved and start generating revenue. He says that he told himself the adverse effects were probably overstated or would not manifest in the general patient population the same way they manifested in a clinical trial. Told himself that every drug has risks and that the benefits for the 82% of patients who did not experience problems outweighed the harms to the 18% who did. Robert asks if Gregory understands that his choice has resulted in thousands of people suffering accelerated cognitive decline. And Gregory says that he understands, but that understanding does not change the fact that his debt was real and his creditors were not going to wait. Robert tells him that the company is notifying the FDA tomorrow morning and initiating voluntary recall, and that law enforcement will be contacted, and that Gregory should retain a lawyer because the evidence against him is substantial, and the charges will likely include fraud and conspiracy and possibly manslaughter. They leave him sitting in his study staring at the documents that lay out his destruction. And as they walk back to the car, Daniel says that Gregory will probably run before morning. They return to Crawford Industries headquarters and work through the night, preparing the disclosure package for the FDA and drafting the press release that will announce the voluntary recall, and composing the letter that will go to 40,000 patients telling them to stop taking Neuroxin immediately. The sun rises over the city while they work, and at 7 a.m. Robert calls an emergency board meeting to brief the directors on the situation before it becomes public. And he watches their faces as he explains what happened and how it happened and what the company is going to do to address it. The board votes unanimously to accept his recommendations, including immediate termination of Gregory, Marshall's employment, full cooperation with regulatory and law enforcement investigations, establishment of a victim compensation fund, and implementation of enhanced safety protocols. 9 a.m. Robert stands before a room full of reporters and delivers a statement that he knows will end his career as CEO and will probably destroy the company he spent 28 years building. And he takes full responsibility for the failure of oversight that allowed one person to hide evidence of harm. The questions from reporters are aggressive and accusatory, and Robert answers each one as honestly as he can, while knowing that honesty in this situation provides no protection and no redemption, but only the small dignity of facing consequences without flinching. Jessica Morgan watches the press conference from her desk outside his office, and she thinks about the manila folder she found in an archive drawer and wonders if she should have left it there. Wonders if bringing it forward saved lives or simply accelerated a disaster that was always going to happen eventually. And she realizes that some questions have no good answers, and that doing the right thing sometimes means choosing between different kinds of pain rather than choosing between right and wrong. The press conference ends at 10:30, and by 11, the stock price of Crawford Industries has dropped 42% as investors stampede toward the exits in the kind of panic that happens when trust evaporates and nobody wants to be the last one holding worthless paper. And Robert watches the numbers fall on the monitors in the trading room, knowing that billions of dollars in market capitalization are disappearing in real time, and that thousands of people who invested their retirement savings in what they believed was a stable pharmaceutical company are watching their futures dissolve. The phone lines are overwhelmed with calls from shareholders and analysts and journalists, and the investor relations department has stopped even trying to answer, because there are no answers that will stop the bleeding, no words that will restore confidence once it has been shattered this completely. The company's credit rating is downgraded twice before lunch, from investment grade to junk status, and the banks that provide the company's operating credit lines send notices that they are exercising their right to demand immediate repayment of outstanding balances totaling $370 million. And Robert understands that Crawford Industries is not just facing a public relations crisis or a legal liability problem, but an existential threat that could result in bankruptcy within weeks if they cannot stabilize the financial situation. The FDA responds to the disclosure with a speed that suggests they were already suspicious and were just waiting for someone to confirm their concerns. And by 2 in the afternoon, federal inspectors are on site at Crawford Industries headquarters, demanding access to all files and records related to Neuroxin development and approval. And they bring with them a criminal investigator from the Department of Justice who introduces himself as Special Agent Michael Brennan, and who makes it clear through his tone and questions that he is not here to help the company, but rather to build a criminal case against whoever is responsible for the fraud. Robert directs Thomas Riley to cooperate fully with the investigators and to provide unrestricted access to any documents they request. And Thomas spends the afternoon in conference rooms with federal agents, while Robert deals with the cascading consequences of the morning's disclosure, including angry calls from institutional investors threatening lawsuits, and from members of Congress demanding hearings, and from patient advocacy groups calling for criminal prosecutions. Jessica sits at her desk outside Robert's office and watches people move through the halls with the kind of shell-shocked expressions that come from having your world turned upside down without warning. And she overhears conversations between employees who are updating their resumes and calling recruiters because they understand that working for a company associated with a major pharmaceutical scandal is toxic for career prospects. Regardless of individual innocence, her phone rings constantly with reporters trying to reach Robert, and with employees asking if they are going to lose their jobs, and with vendors demanding payment on outstanding invoices before the company goes bankrupt. And she deflects and transfers and takes messages while wondering how her simple act of bringing forward a hidden document has triggered an avalanche that is burying everyone in its path. She thinks about Gregory Marshall and whether he has fled or is still sitting in his study, staring at the evidence of his destruction. And she wonders if knowing why he did what he did makes any difference to the thousands of patients whose lives he damaged in pursuit of personal, financial survival. The first lawsuit is filed before the market closes, a class action complaint on behalf of all shareholders who purchased Crawford Industries stock in the 6 months following Neuroxin's approval. And the complaint alleges fraud and misrepresentation and breach of fiduciary duty, and seeks damages in excess of $5 billion, which is more than the company's entire current market capitalization. Thomas Riley reads the complaint and tells Robert that this is just the beginning, that they should expect dozens of additional lawsuits from patients and their families, and from pension funds, and from state attorneys general, and that the company's insurance coverage will be woefully inadequate to cover the potential liability. Robert asks what options they have for defending against the litigation, and Thomas says honestly that their options are limited because the facts are not in dispute. They did put a dangerous drug on the market, and they did fail to prevent one of their executives from hiding evidence of that danger. And no amount of legal maneuvering can change those fundamental realities. The patient advocacy groups move faster than Robert expected, and by late afternoon, there are protesters outside Crawford Industries headquarters carrying signs demanding justice for Neuroxin victims and chanting slogans about corporate greed killing vulnerable patients. And the local news stations send camera crews to capture footage of angry families holding photographs of loved ones who developed accelerated cognitive decline after being prescribed the drug. Robert watches the coverage on the television in his office and sees a woman in her 60s holding a picture of her husband and telling a reporter that he was doing fine on his previous Alzheimer's medication until his doctor switched him to Neuroxin 6 months ago, and now he no longer recognizes her face or remembers their 53 years of marriage. And the raw grief in her voice makes Robert feel physically ill because he knows that her husband's deterioration is a direct result of decisions made inside this building by people Robert hired and trusted Gregory. Marshall does not flee as Daniel Wright predicted, but instead appears at FBI headquarters at 4 in the afternoon, accompanied by a criminal defense. The attorney named Jonathan Pierce, who has a reputation for representing white-collar defendants in high-profile cases, and Gregory provides a voluntary statement admitting that he hid the Riverside report and forged the email from Dr. Blackwell's account and threatened Margaret Sullivan when she started asking questions. His attorney negotiates a proffer agreement that provides Gregory with limited immunity for his statements in exchange for his cooperation with the government's investigation. And the strategy becomes clear when Gregory tells investigators that he was not acting alone, that he was approached by someone inside the company who suggested the plan and provided him with the technical assistance needed to forge emails and alter document management logs, and that this person promised Gregory would be protected if anything went wrong. The investigators ask, who this person is, and Gregory provides a name that sends shockwaves through the investigation, because the name he gives is Amanda Foster, the Vice President of Marketing, who has worked at Crawford Industries for 16 years, and who Robert has always considered one of his most loyal and competent executives. The revelation that Gregory had an accomplice transforms the investigation from a case of individual malfeasance into something more complex and conspiratorial, and Special Agent Brennan obtains a warrant to search Amanda Foster's office and electronic devices within hours of Gregory's statement. Amanda is brought into an interrogation room at FBI headquarters and questioned about her relationship with Gregory and her knowledge of the Riverside report, and she denies everything with the kind of indignant outrage that comes from either genuine innocence or skilled deception. She says that Gregory is lying to deflect blame from himself and that she had no knowledge of the hidden report until Robert's press conference this morning, and she demands to speak with her attorney before answering any additional questions. The FBI agents let her go, but make it clear that she should not leave the jurisdiction and should expect additional questioning as the investigation progresses. Thomas Riley tells Robert about Gregory's accusation against Amanda, and Robert's first reaction is disbelief, because Amanda has been with the company for 16 years and has always been professional and reliable, and has shown no signs of the kind of moral flexibility that would allow her to participate in covering up patient harm for financial gain. But Thomas walks him through the financial analysis that Daniel Wright conducted on all senior executives, and shows Robert that Amanda also had significant personal debt, including a mortgage that was underwater after the housing market crash, and credit card balances that were approaching their limits, and that her compensation package was heavily weighted towards stock options that only became valuable if the company's stock price increased substantially. Thomas also shows Robert email evidence that Amanda and Gregory had multiple private meetings in the weeks before the Riverside report was due, meetings that were not on their official calendars and that both executives characterized as informal lunch discussions when asked about them by investigators. The circumstantial evidence against Amanda is strong, but not definitive, and Robert finds himself in the uncomfortable position of not knowing whether one of his most trusted executives is a co-conspirator in a fraud that killed patients, or is being falsely accused by a desperate man trying to reduce his own culpability. He calls Amanda directly and asks her to come to his office immediately, and when she arrives 20 minutes later, he can see that she has been crying and that the composure she maintained during FBI questioning has crumbled under the weight of being accused. She sits across from his desk and tells him that she understands why he might doubt her, given Gregory's accusations, but that she is completely innocent of any wrongdoing and that she would never participate in anything that could harm patients. Robert wants to believe her, because believing her means that the betrayal is contained to one person rather than spreading through multiple levels of the organization. But he also knows that trusting people without verification is how the company ended up in this disaster in the first place. He asks Amanda to explain the private meetings with Gregory in the weeks before the Riverside report was submitted, and Amanda says that Gregory had approached her about a potential restructuring of the marketing department that would have shifted resources toward neuroxin promotion once the drug was approved, and that they met informally to discuss strategy without involving other executives because Gregory wanted to keep the plans confidential until they were fully developed. Robert asks if she has any documentation of these discussions or any emails that would corroborate her version of events. And Amanda says that most of their communication was verbal, because Gregory insisted on keeping the planning off the record until they were ready to present a complete proposal. This explanation is plausible, but also convenient, in that it provides no way to verify whether Amanda is telling the truth or covering her tracks. If this betrayal made you question who you can trust, leave a scales emoji in the comments. The investigation continues through the evening and into the night as federal agents work to verify or refute Gregory's claims about Amanda's involvement. And they discover something that neither confirms nor denies her guilt, but does add another layer of complexity to the situation. Amanda's work laptop shows evidence that someone accessed it remotely on multiple occasions during the period when the Riverside report was being hidden. And the remote access came from an IP address that traces back to Gregory's home network, which means that Gregory had the ability to access Amanda's files and emails without her knowledge or consent. This discovery raises the possibility that Gregory is framing Amanda by creating false evidence of her involvement, or alternatively, that Gregory needed remote access to her system to coordinate their conspiracy without leaving obvious traces of communication between them. Special Agent Brennan brings this information to Robert and Thomas and tells them that the investigation is now focused on determining whether Amanda was an active participant in the cover-up or whether she was a victim of Gregory's manipulation and is now being falsely accused as part of his strategy to distribute blame. Brennan says that without additional evidence one way or another, they cannot charge Amanda based solely on Gregory's uncorroborated allegations, but that they will continue investigating her finances and communications and electronic activity to look for anything that might definitively establish her role. Robert asks how long this investigation will take, and Brennan says it could be weeks or months, depending on what they find and how cooperative Amanda is with providing access to her personal devices and accounts. The media coverage intensifies over the following days as more details about the scandal emerge and as patient advocacy groups organize protests and as members of Congress announce plans for hearings to investigate how the FDA approval process failed to catch the hidden safety data. Robert finds himself at the center of a firestorm, with his face appearing on the covers of business magazines under headlines like "The CEO Who Didn't Know" and "How Crawford Industries Betrayed Patient Trust" and "The $400 million Lie." And the coverage is brutal in its assessment of his leadership and his oversight and his responsibility for creating a corporate culture where fraud could occur undetected. He does multiple interviews trying to explain what happened and how the company is responding and what steps are being taken to prevent similar failures in the future. But every interview generates more questions and more criticism and more speculation about what he knew and when he knew it. The recall process proves more complicated than anticipated because neuroxin has been prescribed to 40,000 patients by approximately 8,000 different physicians across all 50 states, and reaching each patient and physician requires coordination with pharmacies and insurance companies and healthcare systems that all have different communication protocols and privacy requirements. The company establishes a dedicated hotline for patients with questions about the recall and hires additional medical staff to handle the volume of calls. And within the first week, they receive over 15,000 calls from frightened patients and family members asking what they should do and whether the damage is reversible and whether they can sue. The medical staff tries to provide reassurance while being honest about the risks, explaining that patients who stop taking neuroxin immediately may halt further decline, but that any damage already done is likely permanent. And these conversations are devastating for everyone involved because there is no good news to deliver and no way to undo what has been done. The financial pressure on Crawford Industries becomes critical within 2 weeks of the disclosure, as the company burns through its cash reserves, paying for the recall and the legal defense and the victim compensation fund that the board established. And the banks that are demanding repayment of credit lines refuse to extend any additional credit or provide any grace period for repayment. Robert is forced to sell several company assets, including a research facility in North Carolina and the corporate jet, and a portfolio of patents that are not related to neuroxin, and the sales happen at distressed prices because buyers understand that Crawford Industries is desperate and cannot afford to negotiate. The asset sales generate enough cash to keep the company operating for another few months, but not enough to fully repay the bank debt. And Robert begins having conversations with bankruptcy attorneys about whether Chapter 11 reorganization is inevitable. Jessica Morgan continues working as Robert's secretary through all of this, even though her friends tell her she should find a new job before Crawford Industries collapses completely, and she stays partly because she needs the income and the health insurance for her daughter, but also partly because she feels responsible for what is happening and wants to see it through to whatever conclusion awaits. She fields hundreds of phone calls from angry stakeholders and manages Robert's impossible schedule of meetings and interviews and legal proceedings, and she watches him age visibly under the pressure of trying to save a company that may not be savable. She thinks often about the moment she placed that manila folder on his desk and wonders what would have happened if she had left it in the archive drawer, wonders whether ignorance would have been better than knowledge, and then she remembers the woman on television holding the photograph of her husband who no longer recognizes her face, and she knows that bringing forward the report was the right thing, regardless of the consequences. The breakthrough in the investigation comes from an unexpected source when a junior IT technician named Kevin Morris approaches Daniel Wright with information that he says has been troubling him since the scandal broke. Kevin explains that approximately 8 months ago, Gregory Marshall asked him to help with what Gregory described as a routine password reset on his laptop because Gregory claimed he had forgotten his credentials, and Kevin provided the reset without thinking much about it because helping executives with IT problems is part of his job. What struck Kevin as odd in retrospect was that Gregory specifically asked Kevin to reset the password without logging the request in the IT service ticket system, claiming that he did not want to create a bureaucratic paper trail for something so minor. Kevin says that at the time, this seemed like a reasonable request from a busy executive who did not want to deal with administrative overhead, but that after learning about the scandal and about Gregory's role in hiding the report, Kevin began to wonder whether the password reset might have been part of a larger scheme. Daniel asks Kevin whether he kept any records of the password reset, even though Gregory asked him not to create a service ticket. And Kevin says that he has a personal log where he tracks all the work he does, because he likes to have documentation in case questions arise later about his activities. He provides Daniel with a copy of his log entry showing that he reset Gregory's laptop password on February 14th of last year, which is exactly 3 days before the forged email was sent from Dr. Patricia Blackwell's account. And this timeline raises a troubling possibility that Gregory needed a clean laptop with no logged history in order to access Patricia's office and send the forged email without leaving traces on his own device. Daniel takes this information to Special Agent Brennan, who immediately recognizes its significance because it suggests premeditation and planning rather than opportunistic fraud. The investigation expands to examine whether Gregory obtained any other technical assistance from IT staff in the months leading up to the report being hidden, and agents interview every member of the IT department, asking about unusual requests or off-the-books help that Gregory might have solicited. They discover that Gregory also asked Michael Torres, the Director of Information Technology, for advice about how the document management system logs modifications and whether those logs can be edited or deleted, and that Michael provided a technical explanation without understanding why Gregory wanted to know. Michael tells investigators that he assumed Gregory was asking about the logging system because he was concerned about document security and wanted to understand how the company tracks changes to sensitive files, and that it never occurred to him that Gregory might be planning to use this knowledge to cover up evidence tampering. The forensic analysis of Gregory's laptop reveals that it was wiped clean shortly after Kevin Morris reset the password, and that a fresh installation of the operating system was performed, which is consistent with someone trying to eliminate any evidence of prior activities before using the device for criminal purposes. The analysts are able to recover fragments of deleted files from the hard drive, including portions of a document that appears to be a step-by-step plan for hiding the Riverside report. And while the recovered fragments are incomplete, they include enough detail to show that Gregory had mapped out the entire scheme, including the forged email and the document misfiling and the threat to Margaret Sullivan weeks before he actually executed the plan. This evidence of premeditation makes Gregory's claim that Amanda Foster was his accomplice more credible because the level of planning involved suggests he had help thinking through the logistics and anticipating potential complications. Special Agent Brennan decides to bring Amanda back in for additional questioning, armed with the new evidence about Gregory's technical preparations and his conversations with IT staff. And this time, Amanda's attorney advises her to cooperate fully because the circumstantial evidence is accumulating, and because continuing to deny everything makes her look guilty, even if she is innocent. Amanda provides a detailed account of her interactions with Gregory in the months before the Riverside report was hidden, and she acknowledges that Gregory did discuss the report with her in general terms, including his concern that negative findings would hurt the stock price and damage his ability to repay his personal debts. She says that Gregory asked her opinion about how the marketing department would handle the situation if Neuroxin's approval was delayed or denied, and that she told him honestly that a delayed approval would require completely rethinking the product launch timeline and would likely result in significant layoffs in her department. Amanda insists that this conversation was purely hypothetical and that she never suggested hiding the report or forging emails or threatening anyone, and that the first time she learned that Gregory had actually taken action to conceal the data was when Robert held his press conference announcing the voluntary recall. She provides access to her personal laptop and phone and email accounts and financial records, and the forensic analysis of her devices shows no evidence of direct coordination with Gregory beyond the meetings they both acknowledged, and no evidence of any unusual financial transactions that might suggest she benefited from the cover-up. The remote access to her laptop from Gregory's home network is explained by the discovery that Gregory had installed spyware on her device during one of their lunch meetings when she briefly left her laptop unattended, and this spyware would have allowed him to monitor her communications and potentially plant false evidence without her knowledge. The investigation gradually shifts away from treating Amanda as a suspect and toward treating her as another victim of Gregory's manipulation, someone whose confidential conversations were exploited to build a case against her if the scheme was ever discovered. Special Agent Brennan tells Robert that while Amanda showed poor judgment in discussing sensitive business matters with Gregory without reporting his concerns to compliance or legal, there is no evidence that she participated in or knew about the actual cover-up. Robert is relieved by this conclusion because it means the conspiracy was limited to one person, rather than spreading through multiple levels of leadership. But he is also disturbed by how easily Gregory was able to create the appearance of Amanda's complicity by simply accessing her device and monitoring her activities. The full scope of Gregory Marshall's scheme becomes clear when investigators reconstruct the timeline and identify all the steps he took to hide the Riverside report and protect himself from detection. He began planning the cover-up at least 6 weeks before the final report was due, based on the fragments recovered from his laptop, and he used his position as CFO to gain access to systems and information that allowed him to identify vulnerabilities in the company's document management and email security. He cultivated relationships with IT staff under the guise of wanting to understand technical infrastructure better, and he used those relationships to obtain knowledge and assistance that he later weaponized for fraud. He identified Margaret Sullivan as a potential weak point because she was relatively new to her role and might not question unusual filing instructions from someone with Patricia Blackwell's authority, and when Margaret did start asking questions, he threatened her with specific personal details that he obtained through his access to company HR systems. The most disturbing aspect of Gregory's scheme is how thoroughly he planned to shift blame if discovered, going so far as to plant evidence that would implicate Amanda Foster and create reasonable doubt about whether he acted alone. The spyware on Amanda's laptop and the forged records suggesting coordination between them were insurance policies that Gregory created to protect himself, and if not for Kevin Morris's personal log documenting the password reset and the forensic recovery of Gregory's planning documents, he might have successfully convinced investigators that Amanda was his partner in crime. This level of calculation and foresight suggests someone who is not just desperate, but sociopathic in their willingness to destroy others to save themselves, and Robert realizes that he completely misjudged Gregory's character during the 12 years they worked together. The federal grand jury returns an indictment against Gregory Marshall, charging him with wire fraud and conspiracy and making false statements to federal investigators and multiple counts of tampering with evidence. And the indictment runs to 47 pages, detailing every aspect of the scheme, including the forged emails and the hidden report and the threats against Margaret Sullivan and the attempt to frame Amanda Foster. Gregory's attorney tries to negotiate a plea agreement that would cap his sentence at 15 years, but federal prosecutors refuse because they want to make an example of someone who deliberately hid safety data that resulted in patient harm. And they indicate that they will seek the maximum possible sentence under federal guidelines, which could be 30 years or more. Gregory pleads not guilty at his arraignment and is released on bond with electronic monitoring and travel restrictions, and his trial is scheduled for 8 months away. The patient lawsuits begin arriving in waves, with the first cases filed by families of neuroxin users who died after developing accelerated cognitive decline following their prescription, and these wrongful death claims seek damages for lost life expectancy and pain and suffering and loss of companionship. Additional lawsuits follow from patients who are still alive but whose cognitive function has deteriorated dramatically since starting neuroxin, and these cases seek compensation for ongoing medical care and lost quality of life and emotional distress. The plaintiff attorneys coordinate their efforts through a multi-district litigation structure that consolidates all the cases before a single federal judge for pretrial proceedings, and within 3 months there are over 2,000 individual lawsuits representing approximately 6,800 patients and their families. Thomas Riley tells Robert that the company's total potential liability across all the lawsuits could exceed $8 billion if the plaintiffs prevail on all claims, and that even a more conservative estimate, assuming the company wins some cases and settles others at reduced amounts, still results in liability of at least $3 billion, which is more than Crawford Industries can possibly pay without filing for bankruptcy protection. The company's directors' and officers' liability insurance provides coverage up to $500 million, but the insurers are already disputing whether the policy covers this situation, given that the harm resulted from intentional fraud by a senior executive and the insurance litigation could take years to resolve. Robert meets with bankruptcy attorneys to understand his options and learns that Chapter 11 reorganization would allow the company to continue operating while restructuring its debts, but that it would also result in shareholders being wiped out and Robert losing control of the company he founded. The decision about whether to file for bankruptcy becomes urgent when several major creditors file involuntary bankruptcy petitions arguing that Crawford Industries is insolvent and cannot pay its debts as they come due, and the company has 30 days to respond to these petitions by either proving it is solvent or accepting bankruptcy protection. Robert spends those 30 days trying to find alternative financing or strategic partners who might be willing to invest in the company or acquire it. But every potential investor concludes that the liability exposure is too great and that the Neuroxin scandal has permanently damaged the company's reputation and prospects. On the 28th day, Robert calls an emergency board meeting and recommends that the company file voluntary Chapter 11 bankruptcy to prevent the creditors from forcing an involuntary liquidation that would destroy any possibility of preserving jobs or compensating victims. The board votes to approve the bankruptcy filing, and Robert signs the petition that evening, and Crawford Industries officially enters bankruptcy protection the following morning with the filing of hundreds of pages of schedules listing assets and liabilities and creditors. The bankruptcy filing makes front-page news and triggers another wave of panic among employees who fear they will lose their jobs, and among patients who worry that the Victim Compensation Fund will be dissolved before they receive any payment. Robert holds a company-wide meeting to address employee concerns and promises that the bankruptcy is a reorganization, not a liquidation, and that every effort will be made to preserve as many jobs as possible. But he can see from the faces looking back at him that trust has been destroyed, and promises from management no longer carry weight. Jessica sits in the back of that company-wide meeting and watches Robert try to reassure employees who have every reason to doubt him, and she thinks about the path that led from her discovery of a hidden manila folder to this moment where a 28-year-old company is filing for bankruptcy and thousands of patients are suffering, and Gregory Marshall is facing decades in federal prison. She wonders again whether she should have left the folder in that archive drawer, and she reaches the same conclusion she always reaches, which is that hiding harm to protect the status quo is never acceptable, no matter how painful the alternative becomes. And she tries to take comfort in knowing that at least now the truth is public and patients can make informed decisions, and systems can be reformed to prevent similar disasters in the future. The bankruptcy process takes 18 months to work through the courts as Crawford Industries restructures its debts and sells assets and negotiates settlements with the thousands of patients and families who filed claims against the company. And during those 18 months, Robert Crawford transforms from the confident founder of a pharmaceutical empire into someone quieter and more reflective, who understands that success measured only in profit and growth is success built on sand. He steps down as CEO 3 months after the bankruptcy filing, because the board decides that moving forward requires leadership untainted by association with the scandal, And while this removal from the position he held for 28 years feels like losing a limb, it also brings relief, because the burden of trying to save the company while simultaneously accepting responsibility for its failures was crushing him under weight he could no longer carry. His replacement is an outside turnaround specialist named Catherine Walsh, who has experience restructuring troubled companies and who brings a ruthless efficiency to cutting costs and maximizing value for creditors. And Robert watches from his position as a minority shareholder with no operational authority as the company he built is dismantled and reborn into something leaner and harder and less recognizable. The criminal trial of Gregory Marshall begins 14 months after his indictment and lasts for 6 weeks as federal prosecutors methodically present evidence of his scheme to hide the Riverside Report and frame Amanda Foster and threaten Margaret Sullivan into silence, and Robert attends every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery, watching the man he once trusted defend actions that are indefensible through a combination of victim blaming and appeals to sympathy about his desperate financial situation. Gregory's defense attorney tries to argue that the pharmaceutical industry routinely downplays negative trial results and that Gregory was simply following common practices that everyone in the industry understands, even if they do not publicly acknowledge. But this argument collapses when prosecutors present internal Crawford Industries emails showing that the company had strict policies against hiding safety data and that Gregory violated multiple explicit protocols when he concealed the Riverside Report. The jury deliberates for 9 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts, and the judge at sentencing describes Gregory's crimes as particularly egregious because they involved betraying the trust of vulnerable patients and deliberately causing harm in pursuit of personal financial gain. And he sentences Gregory to 27 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole before serving at least 23 years. Robert feels no satisfaction when the sentence is announced because 27 years in prison does not undo the damage Gregory caused and does not restore cognitive function to the thousands of patients who deteriorated after taking neuroxin. And he realizes that justice in cases like this is always incomplete, because punishment cannot reverse harm and accountability cannot resurrect trust. He does feel a measure of closure, knowing that the person responsible has been held accountable, and that the legal system worked, even if it worked slowly and imperfectly. And he leaves the courthouse after the sentencing, thinking that perhaps the most important outcome is not the punishment imposed on Gregory, but rather the precedent established that pharmaceutical executives who hide safety data will face serious criminal consequences that might deter others from making similar choices in the future. The bankruptcy reorganization plan that emerges after months of negotiation allocates the company's remaining assets among competing creditor claims, with patient victims receiving priority over financial creditors. And the plan creates a victim compensation fund capitalized with $1.2 billion that will be distributed among the 6,800 patients who can prove they were harmed by neuroxin. The fund establishes tiers of compensation based on severity of harm, with families of patients who died receiving the highest payments, and patients with moderate cognitive decline receiving smaller amounts. And an independent administrator is appointed to review claims and make determinations about eligibility and payment amounts. Robert contributes his personal assets to the compensation fund, including the proceeds from selling his house and his investment portfolio and his Crawford Industries stock. And while this liquidation of his wealth does not come close to fully compensating victims, it represents everything he has accumulated over 40 years of work, and he believes that giving everything is the minimum ethical requirement for someone whose oversight failures enabled the harm. Jessica Morgan continues working for Crawford Industries through the bankruptcy reorganization, even though most of the original executive team departs for new opportunities. And she stays partly because the health insurance remains intact and her daughter still needs expensive therapies, but also partly because she feels a responsibility to see the victim compensation process through to completion. She is assigned to help administer the compensation fund and spends her days reviewing claims and speaking with patients and families about their experiences with neuroxin. And these conversations are heartbreaking in their details about lives destroyed and relationships fractured and memories lost forever. She speaks with a man in his 50s whose wife developed such severe cognitive decline after taking neuroxin that she now requires 24-hour care and no longer recognizes their children. And she speaks with a woman in her 70s who took neuroxin for 3 months before the recall and whose deterioration was caught early enough that she retained most of her memories, but lost her ability to live independently. And she speaks with families who are grateful for any compensation, but who make clear that no amount of money can restore what was taken from them. The process of reviewing claims and hearing these stories transforms Jessica's understanding of what she did when she brought forward the hidden report, and she moves from questioning whether she made the right choice to understanding that bringing forward the truth was the only choice, because the alternative was allowing the harm to continue indefinitely while more patients were prescribed a drug that accelerated the disease it was supposed to slow. She thinks about the woman holding the photograph of her husband at the protest outside Crawford Industries and wonders if that woman applied for compensation and whether the money will help with his care. And she makes a note to search the claims database for matches, because providing help to that specific woman has become symbolically important to her in ways she cannot fully articulate. She finds a claim filed by Barbara Whitmore of Seattle, whose husband Edward was prescribed neuroxin 6 months before the recall, and who now requires memory care placement that costs $8,000 monthly. And Jessica processes the claim herself and ensures that Barbara receives payment in the highest compensation tier, because Edward's decline was severe and thoroughly documented. Robert establishes a foundation using the last of his liquid assets to support research into treatments for drug-induced cognitive decline and to advocate for stronger pharmaceutical safety regulations. And the foundation is small compared to what Crawford Industries once was, but it represents a genuine attempt to create something positive from the wreckage of the scandal. He recruits Dr. Patricia Blackwell to serve as the foundation's medical director because she was also a victim of Gregory's scheme, and because her expertise in neurology makes her ideally suited to evaluate research proposals. And Patricia accepts the position partly because she needs employment after Crawford Industries downsized its research division, but also partly because she wants to contribute to preventing similar disasters from occurring at other companies. They work together to develop model policies for pharmaceutical companies around clinical trial transparency and executive oversight of safety data. And they testify before congressional committees about the need for stronger penalties for executives who hide adverse effects and for better protections for whistleblowers who report safety concerns. The Foundation's advocacy work leads to the passage of federal legislation known as the Neuroxin Patient Protection Act, which requires pharmaceutical companies to publicly register all clinical trials before they begin and to publish full results, including negative findings, within 1 year of trial completion, and which creates criminal liability for executives who knowingly hide safety data, with mandatory minimum sentences of 10 years for violations that result in patient harm. The legislation also establishes an independent drug safety board within the FDA with authority to conduct surprise audits of pharmaceutical company records and to interview employees confidentially about concerns they may have about data integrity. And while these reforms cannot prevent all future fraud, they create obstacles that make successful cover-ups much more difficult. Robert testifies at the bill signing ceremony about how the hidden Riverside report destroyed his company and harmed thousands of patients. And he tells the assembled legislators and patient advocates that his greatest regret is not the loss of his company or his wealth, but rather the failure of imagination that prevented him from seeing how someone like Gregory Marshall could exploit weaknesses in the oversight systems that Robert had believed were adequate. Amanda Foster, who was falsely accused of being Gregory's accomplice before being cleared by the FBI investigation, files a defamation lawsuit against Gregory, seeking damages for the harm to her reputation and career that resulted from his lies. And while Gregory's incarceration means he has no assets to pay any judgment, Amanda pursues the case anyway because she wants a public declaration that she was innocent and was victimized rather than being a perpetrator. The trial is brief because the evidence of Gregory's fabrications is overwhelming, and the jury awards Amanda $7 million in compensatory damages and $15 million in punitive damages, which will never be collected, but which serves as a legal validation of her innocence. Amanda uses the attention from her legal vindication to write a book about her experience titled The Frame, which becomes a bestseller, and which leads to speaking opportunities about corporate culture and the importance of protecting employees from false accusations. And she rebuilds her career as a consultant, helping companies develop better internal investigation procedures that protect both victims and accused individuals. Margaret Sullivan, who resigned from Crawford Industries after receiving threatening emails, returns to work in the pharmaceutical industry after the FBI investigation confirms she was threatened into silence rather than being a willing participant in the cover-up. And she joins a small biotech company in Arizona, where she works as executive assistant to the CEO and brings With her hard-won knowledge about the importance of questioning instructions that seem unusual, even when they come from authority figures, she maintains contact with Jessica through occasional emails and phone calls, and they develop an unlikely friendship based on their shared experience of being support staff who became inadvertent whistleblowers. And Margaret tells Jessica during one of these calls that the most important lesson she learned from the Neuroxin scandal is that doing the right thing often requires risking the security you have worked hard to build, and that this risk is worth taking, because living with the knowledge that you stayed silent when you should have spoken is a burden that grows heavier with time. The patients who were harmed by Neuroxin organize into an advocacy group called Victims of Neuroxin, which becomes a powerful voice in pharmaceutical policy debates, and which provides support and resources to members who are navigating the compensation process and dealing with the medical and emotional consequences of their cognitive decline. The group holds an annual memorial service for the 217 Neuroxin users who died during or shortly after taking the drug, and Robert attends the first memorial service 3 years after the recall and stands in the back of the room while family members share stories about their loved ones and light candles in their memory. He is approached after the service by Barbara Whitmore, whose husband Edward is one of the patients whose decline was severe enough to require memory care placement, and she tells Robert that she does not forgive him for what happened because forgiveness implies that the harm can be set aside, and her husband's destroyed memories cannot be set aside, but that she appreciates his willingness to attend the memorial and to listen to the stories of harm and to contribute his personal wealth to the compensation fund. Robert tells Barbara that he understands her inability to forgive, and that he does not expect or seek forgiveness, because what happened to Edward and thousands of other patients is unforgivable, and that the only thing he can do is dedicate whatever time he has left to trying to prevent similar harm from occurring to others. Barbara nods and says that this is what she needed to hear, that accountability without excuse is rare enough that she wanted to acknowledge it, even though it does not change her feelings about the harm itself. They stand together for a few moments in silence before Barbara returns to sit with her family, and Robert leaves the memorial service feeling simultaneously worse and better, because bearing witness to suffering you caused is painful but necessary work that cannot be delegated or avoided. Jessica receives recognition from patient advocacy groups for her role in bringing forward the hidden Riverside report, and she is invited to speak at conferences about the importance of empowering employees at all levels to report concerns without fear of retaliation, and she uses these platforms to talk about the 3 sleepless nights she spent deciding whether to give the folder to Robert or to refile it where she found it. She tells audiences that she almost chose silence because she was terrified of losing her job and the insurance coverage that kept her daughter in therapy, and that what finally pushed her to act was imagining having to tell her daughter years later that she had known about something harmful and had done nothing because protecting their immediate security seemed more important than protecting strangers. She says that this decision calculus is what every potential whistleblower faces, and that companies need to eliminate the financial pressure that makes silence seem rational by providing protections and support for employees who report concerns. And her advocacy leads to several states passing enhanced whistleblower protection laws that provide financial assistance and job guarantees for employees who report safety violations. The Crawford Industries that emerges from bankruptcy is a fraction of its former size, with fewer than 800 employees compared to the 4,000 who worked there before the scandal. And the company focuses exclusively on manufacturing generic drugs under contract for other pharmaceutical companies, rather than developing its own products, because the neuroxin disaster destroyed the company's credibility and ability to bring new drugs to market. Catherine Walsh, who led the bankruptcy reorganization, becomes the permanent CEO and implements strict compliance procedures and oversight mechanisms that make it virtually impossible for any single person to hide safety data or manipulate records. And while these procedures create bureaucratic overhead and slow decision-making, they also create multiple checkpoints where potential problems can be identified before they cause harm. Robert remains connected to the company as a minority shareholder and occasional advisor, but has no operational role. And he spends most of his time working with the foundation and speaking about pharmaceutical safety and trying to help other companies learn from Crawford Industries' failures without having to experience their own disasters. The foundation grows slowly but steadily over 5 years as additional donors contribute funding, impressed by Robert's willingness to sacrifice his personal wealth and reputation in service of preventing future harm. And the foundation eventually employs a staff of 12 people who work on research grants and policy advocacy and educational programs for pharmaceutical executives about ethical decision-making under financial pressure. Dr. Patricia Blackwell builds relationships with academic researchers studying drug-induced cognitive decline and helps coordinate multi-institutional studies that would not be possible without the Foundation's funding and organizational support. And several promising treatment approaches emerge from this research, though none can reverse the damage done to neuroxin patients. The Foundation also creates a scholarship program for children of pharmaceutical industry whistleblowers to help offset the financial costs that families often bear when a parent reports wrongdoing and faces career consequences. And the first class of scholarship recipients includes the daughter of an employee at another pharmaceutical company who reported safety concerns about a diabetes drug and was subsequently terminated despite legal protections. Jessica's daughter Emma, whose cerebral palsy initially made Jessica hesitant to risk her job by bringing forward the hidden report benefits from advances in therapy that allow her to gain significant motor function improvements. And by the time Emma is 12 years old, she can walk with minimal assistance and has developed enough hand control to write and use a computer. Jessica tells Emma the story of the manila folder and the decision to bring it forward when Emma is old enough to understand the complexity of the choice. And Emma asks her mother if she regrets the decision, given how much stress it caused their family during the bankruptcy and reorganization. Jessica tells her daughter that regret is not the right word, because she would make the same choice again, knowing what she knows now, but that she wishes there had been a way to do the right thing without causing so much collateral damage to innocent employees and shareholders who bore costs they did not deserve for failures they did not commit. Robert writes a book about the Neuroxin scandal titled The Hidden Report: How One Document Destroyed a Company and What We Can Learn from the Wreckage, which becomes required reading in many business school ethics courses and which generates intense debate about personal responsibility versus systemic failure in corporate disasters. Some reviewers criticize Robert for not taking enough personal responsibility and for focusing too much on Gregory Marshall's individual malfeasance, rather than examining the organizational culture that allowed someone like Gregory to rise to a position where he could cause such harm. And Robert acknowledges in interviews that these criticisms have merit, and that his initial instinct was to blame Gregory entirely because accepting his own culpability was too painful. He says that he has come to understand that both things are true simultaneously, that Gregory made evil choices that deserve condemnation, but that those choices were enabled by oversight failures and cultural weaknesses that Robert, as founder and CEO, should have identified and corrected long before disaster struck. The book's publication leads to an invitation for Robert to teach a seminar on pharmaceutical ethics at a major university, and he accepts the position as a visiting lecturer and discovers that teaching forces him to articulate lessons he learned through painful experience in ways that might help the next generation of pharmaceutical executives avoid similar mistakes. His students are initially skeptical of learning ethics from someone whose company caused such significant harm, but Robert wins them over through honesty about his failures and through his willingness to be challenged on whether redemption is possible for someone whose negligence contributed to deaths and suffering. He assigns his students to analyze the Neuroxin case and to identify the specific decision points where different choices might have led to different outcomes, and the class discussions that emerge from this analysis are among the most intellectually rigorous and emotionally honest conversations about business ethics that many students experience during their academic careers. 10 years after the hidden Riverside report was discovered, Jessica is promoted to Director of Compliance at the reorganized Crawford Industries and is given responsibility for ensuring that the company maintains the rigorous safety and transparency standards that emerged from the bankruptcy reorganization. And her rise from executive secretary to senior leadership becomes a symbol of how the disaster transformed the company's culture and created opportunities for people who might have remained in support roles under the old regime. She implements a program that requires all employees, regardless of level, to complete annual training on recognizing and reporting potential safety concerns. And she creates multiple anonymous channels for employees to raise concerns without fear that their identity will be revealed to executives who might retaliate. The program is initially met with cynicism from some employees who remember the Neuroxin scandal and doubt whether the company is genuinely committed to transparency. But over time, the consistent follow-through on reported concerns and the lacquer of retaliation against whistleblowers builds trust that the new culture is authentic rather than performative. Robert turns 70 years old and holds a small celebration at the Foundation's offices, attended by Patricia Blackwell and Jessica Morgan, and several patient advocates who have worked with him on pharmaceutical safety legislation. And during the informal speeches that accompany the cake cutting, several people mentioned that Robert has transformed himself from a disgraced executive into a genuine force for reform, who has likely prevented more harm through his advocacy and education. Work than Crawford Industries caused through the Neuroxin disaster. Robert is uncomfortable with this redemption narrative and says in his own remarks that what he has done in the decade since the scandal is not redemption, but rather the basic moral obligation of someone who failed in his oversight responsibilities, and who has the resources and platform to try to prevent others from failing in similar ways. He says that he will carry responsibility for the Neuroxin patients for the rest of his life, and that no amount of good work can balance the ledger or earn forgiveness from people who have every right to remain angry. The speech is recorded and shared online, where it generates discussion about whether corporate executives who cause harm through negligence can be redeemed through subsequent good works, or whether some failures are too consequential to allow for redemption regardless of later efforts. Robert ignores most of this online debate because he has learned that public opinion about his character and motives is less important than the actual work of preventing harm and supporting victims. And he focuses his remaining energy on expanding the Foundation's research funding and on mentoring young pharmaceutical executives who reach out to him for advice about navigating ethical dilemmas in their careers. He tells these mentees that the most important lesson from the Neuroxin disaster is that the pressure to meet financial targets and please shareholders can create incentives to hide problems rather than addressing them, and that resisting these pressures requires both personal courage and structural supports that make doing the right thing less costly than doing the expedient thing. Jessica's daughter, Emma, graduates from high school with honors and receives a scholarship from the foundation that Robert created to attend college, where she studies public health, with the goal of working on healthcare access issues for people with disabilities. And Jessica attends Emma's high school graduation, thinking about the path that led from finding a manila folder in an archive drawer to watching her daughter walk across a stage to receive her diploma. She realizes that the decision she made to bring forward the hidden report shaped Emma's life in ways both visible and invisible, teaching her daughter through example that protecting others sometimes requires sacrificing security and that living with the consequences of doing the right thing is easier than living with the knowledge that you stayed silent when you should have spoken. Emma's college essay discusses her mother's whistleblowing and how it influenced her decision to pursue a career in public health. And the essay wins an award from a medical ethics organization that recognizes student writing about healthcare integrity. Gregory Marshall remains in federal prison and will not be eligible for release until he has served 23 years of his 27-year sentence, and he has minimal contact with the outside world beyond occasional letters from his ex-wife who divorced, him 2 years after his conviction, and who maintains limited communication primarily to update him on their adult children who want nothing to do with their father. Robert receives a letter from Gregory approximately 8 years after the conviction, and the letter is not an apology but rather an attempt to explain his thinking during the period when he was hiding the Riverside report, and to ask whether Robert understands why the financial pressure Gregory was under made concealing the data seem like the only available option. Robert does not respond to the letter because he understands that what Gregory wants is validation, that his choices were understandable if not justified, and Robert refuses to provide that validation because Gregory's choices were neither understandable nor justified, and were in fact precisely the kind of self-serving rationalization that pharmaceutical executives must resist if they are to fulfill their obligations to patient safety. The 20th anniversary of Crawford Industries' founding passes without much fanfare because the company that exists now bears little resemblance to the company Robert built over 28 years before its bankruptcy and restructuring, and Robert marks the anniversary quietly with a visit to the manufacturing facility in Pennsylvania, where the company began, in a small rented space with 3 employees and a single contract. The facility has been sold and converted to other uses, but Robert stands in the parking lot for a few minutes, remembering the early years when everything seemed possible, and when he believed that building a successful pharmaceutical company was primarily about developing good drugs and managing finances. Effectively, he understands now that building a company that deserves to exist requires something more fundamental, which is creating a culture where employees at every level feel empowered to speak up about problems, and where executives face meaningful consequences for prioritizing profits over safety. And he wishes he had understood this truth 20 years earlier, before thousands of patients were harmed by his failure to build such a culture at Crawford Industries. From 0 to 10, what score does this story deserve? And before you click away, understand something that took Robert Crawford 2 decades and a destroyed company to learn. The truth is never convenient, and silence is never safe. And the moment you find that hidden document, or hear that whispered concern, or see that buried report, you have already been handed a choice that will define who you are more than any success you achieve or any title you earn. Jessica Morgan was a single mother making $42,000 a year with a daughter who needed expensive therapy, and she risked everything to bring forward a manila folder that nobody told her to find. And because she made that choice, 7,200 people stopped taking a drug that was destroying their minds. And if this story makes you think differently about courage or responsibility, or the price of staying silent when you know something is wrong, then subscribe to this channel, because every story we tell here asks the same question in different ways. When the moment comes, will you be brave enough to tell the truth, even when it costs everything? Leave your answer in the comments, because the world is full of hidden documents and people who need you to find them.